Hello world, my name is Andy Silvers and today I'm going to build a micro ATX PC with one arm. Welcome back to the channel. If this is your first video, hi. My name is Andy Silvers, and in this video, I'm going to finally build a desktop. That's right, I have reviewed a number of different laptops and other portable devices like tablets over the years, but I have never actually built a PC from the ground up. So this is going to be my first time doing it. I'm going to make a lot of mistakes, but that's part of the fun. You can tear me to shreds in the comments. That'll be a lot of fun for you. And if you have never built a PC yourself, then this could be a great learning experience. I'm going to use a number of different budget components in order to demonstrate that you do not have to spend $1,000 in order to have a solid PC build. Oh, I almost forgot. Graphics card. Okay, so strictly speaking, this is not going to be a PC gaming build. As those who are familiar with the channel know, I don't really do a whole ton of gaming per se. Instead, this is going to be more of an entry-level workstation build using the Asus Prime case. This is a micro ATX case. I will be using a Thermaltake power supply, 500 watts, a Peerless Assassin CPU cooler. It's a fan-based cooler. It is not a water cooler. I don't want to even mess with that today. A Asus RTX 3060 with 12 gigs of VRAM, an MSI B60M-A Wi-Fi motherboard, and the CPU for the build, the AMD Ryzen 5 7600X. So this is an overclockable 6-core CPU. Technically, it's sort of a downgrade from my laptop, but because this is a desktop, I should be able to upgrade the overall system for years to come. And I will try to do individual reviews of the 3060 and this particular CPU in the future, but this is not really a review video. This is a general build video, but it's a build video from someone who's never built a PC from the ground up before and someone who has one arm. So we'll see how that goes. I may have to cut out a bunch of really awkward moments, or maybe I'll leave them in for the funny. Who knows? But it should be a lot of fun either way. I wanted something that would have no RGB. I don't like RGB. I know I'm basically speaking blasphemy because anyone who likes watching build guides typically likes gaming and RGB, two things that I'm not a huge fan of. But for those of you who are workstation professionals who use DaVinci Resolve, Lightroom, Photoshop, and for people who are authors who do some other workstation tasks on the side, this is the build for you. Speaking of which, I am an author. I have 3 books on Amazon and Barnes & Noble right now. The link for the Amazon will be in the description. They're literally books for all ages, from 3 to 6-year-olds, all the way to 16 and up. I have a contemporary fantasy for the older readers. It's a lot of great stuff, and in the past few months, it's been gaining a lot of popularity in Steam in terms of sales. So I hope that you will help support the channel directly by checking out the books in the description. So I'm going to talk a little bit about pricing at some point, but I want to note that some of the things in this build are quasi-free because this 2 terabyte SSD from, let's see, WD, this drive was just taken out of my previous computer and will be put into this one. So it was not free, but it was sort of free because it was being migrated from one PC to another. And then this secondary Lexar 2 terabyte SATA SSD, or SATA, will be migrated from an old PC that was actually new, but I don't need it anymore and I sold it off, and will be migrated into this PC. My understanding is that there is one primary SATA drive slot available behind the motherboard. This is an AMD Ryzen 5 7600X. It is a 6-core, 12-thread CPU. The reason I went Team AMD for this build is partially due to pricing. The CPU was roughly $210 at the time of purchase. and because AMD's CPUs lately have just been amazing. They've been able to pack a ton of cores into their CPUs and blow away the competition in terms of price to performance. When you're looking at a more budget conscious build, something that you can build out into the future, this is actually a good way to do that and save you a bit of money now while offering you 3 more RAM slots in the future. Because this is 16 gigs, I can add 3 more of these and have 64 gigs all in one relatively compact system. I've already said that I'm using the RTX 3060 graphics card. This particular one is from Asus, and it is, as you can see, a dual fan, dual slot card. It is relatively basic in a lot of ways. It's not anything crazy special, except that it is the overclocked, the pre-overclocked version, and it has 12 gigs of VRAM. Some 3060s do not have 12 gigs of VRAM. It has a single 8-pin power connector at the top, and it has 1 HDMI and 3 DisplayPort ports. So it is going to be perfect for this build, and as you can see, the white matches the color of the case. Not every component in here matches the case. There may come a day where I want to do an all-white PC build, or maybe like an all-green PC build or something, but that is not today. Alright, so for the motherboard, I decided to go with this particular board from MSI. It is a micro ATX board, obviously, otherwise it won't fit in the case. It is a pretty snazzy board. It was about $144. So those of you at home, you can keep a running track of how much money I'm spending on all these components. It's about $144 for this board, but it is a pretty solid board. It has 2.5 gig Ethernet and Wi-Fi built in, among a few other things. I originally purchased a mini ITX motherboard for this build as sort of a way to play it safe, but then I felt that that was a bad idea from a long-term investment standpoint because the case can support a bigger motherboard, and bigger motherboards have more advantages. Like this motherboard in particular, it has quite a number of extra features that a smaller board does not, including 2 PCIe slots, full 16x width, dual SSD slots. For this build, I will only be filling one of the slots, which is this one. It also has 4 RAM slots as opposed to 2, and it has 4 built-in SATA or SATA expansion slots right here instead of 2. So we're going to be going with this board instead, as it has more overall headers and features which are going to be relevant for future proofing. And then there's the case. This is an Asus Prime. I believe it's, I don't even want to guess. The number may appear on the screen to tell you what the name of the case is exactly. It is a pretty nice case. It comes in 2 colors, black and white, but I wanted to go with white because it looks so much more snazzy in my opinion. It has a sort of soft feel to it. It doesn't have this harsh, dark look to it that I think is certainly nice, but I think I wanted a less gamely aesthetic for this particular build. And this case definitely has that. There have been quite a number of reviews of this case on the internet. You can check those out. However, the general consensus, for the most part, appears to be that this is a very solid case, a very good option for builders who are looking for something that is what you might call mid-size, a mid-size tower, nothing that is gargantuan, but nothing that is teeny tiny. I really enjoy the look of the case. I really like that it has mesh everywhere. A bunch of tests that have been done by channels like Gamers Nexus have shown that all mesh cases have a tendency to give you the best overall thermals, both in sort of a standby mode and when you're actively gaming or rendering. So now the power supply bracket doodad is now free and clear. So that's going to be pretty helpful. This case includes a few cable management ties and some extra screws and standoffs, which are going to be very useful. This is going to be kind of a challenge for me as a first-time builder. I have made modifications to desktop PCs before, but most of them were what you would call pre-builts from companies like Asus, HP, Dell, etc. I have not actually ever had a graphics card inside of a desktop PC before, so that's going to be a first time as well, so that's going to be exciting. So we'll see how that goes. but I have upgraded and or repaired RAM, storage, Wi-Fi card, and a few other bits and bobs. While you technically don't have to, it is recommended that you take out this white fascia piece out of the PC because it can get in the way pretty significantly when you're trying to deal with the power supply unit and other things, like any SATA drives that you mount to the bottom, or any fans that you mount to the bottom of the case. All right, so I've gone ahead and put the power supply inside the case. I have not screwed it in yet, but basically the way that this particular case works is there's this white inner bracket. I've already secured the power supply to the bracket. And basically the power supply can hang from one of three positions. There's a very high position all the way up about here. That's too high as it gets in the way of the front I/O cabling. And it can work, but I don't really want to put stress on the cables if I don't have to. There's a second position which is a little bit lower, and then there's a final position which is the lowest. I'm not going to have a giant 3.5-inch hard drive down here at the bottom, at least not anytime soon. So there's really no reason for me to worry about that, although interestingly enough, I actually have a 3.5-inch hard drive that has all of my work from university, my award-winning short film, which is available on this YouTube channel if you want to check that out. But it also just has a bunch of other data files and stuff on it, so maybe I could put that in here. But no, I'm not going to do that today, at least, because I just want to get the computer set up and make sure that it indeed turns on. Because if it does not turn on, then we got a problem. So like I say, I'm going to go ahead and do the power supply first, just because it's relatively easy compared to... Uh-oh. All right, we got the first problem is there's a screw misalignment. Okay, so I think the secret is to... Okay, no. Yeah, so there's a bit of a misaligned there, which is a problem. What is in the way? All right, after a bit of complicated finagling, I managed to get the power supply fully secured to the mount here. It would make sense at this point to use this time to get the motherboard slightly ready. I'm not going to be able to plug everything in, or it will be very difficult for me to get it into the case. But I will be able to get everything kind of generally situated. So there are some things that are really easy to put in, like RAM. Whenever you only have one stick of RAM, you want to consult the guide for which slot to put it in, or even if you only have two and there's 4 slots. Generally, you do not want to put the RAM in the slot closest to the CPU. You actually want to put it in the second slot, which is what I'm going to do. However, you would want to put it in the slot closest to the CPU if you have a mini ITX board that only has 2 RAM slots. In this case, I have 4. So I'm going to put the stick in the second slot from the CPU. I'm also using the box the motherboard came in essentially as a platform, because doing so can be a good way to avoid any issues with static or metal shards or just anything that could be problematic for a build like this. I know I'm no expert, but I certainly have a little bit of experience with hardware. But I'm sure I will make a number of mistakes in this video, and you can feel happy to point them out in the comment section. Right now, I am taking off the SSD cover that comes with the motherboard for the primary SSD slot. There does not appear to be another standoff included for the second slot, which is unfortunate, but it is what it is. Of course, maybe I'm just missing it, but I do not see it. One thing that's really snazzy about this board is that it actually has a little plastic piece that you can, if you have good coordination, You can actually move the plastic piece back and forth in order to hold the SSD in place, just temporarily, until you get these screws. See, right now it is completely secured. I do not have to put a screw in, but I will. But you don't technically have to in theory because it is completely secured. This is the included heat shield. It is important to always peel off the plastic. It sort of defeats the purpose of having this thermal pad right here if you do not take off the plastic bit. It is a PCIe 4 drive, though it is not the fastest PCIe 4 drive, but it is more than fast enough to be my primary boot device, and I will be adding a second 2 terabytes via SATA later on. The next step is going to be to put on the CPU, or put the CPU into the socket, and then put this relatively large cooler on top of it. Alright, so now I'm installing the AMD AM5 brackets for the CPU. I'm not going to be able to show the entire process necessarily. Luckily, I haven't made too many huge mistakes yet. This is where reading the manual comes in handy. Even if you are an experienced builder, if you do one step out of order, it can mess up the entire process. I also apologize for the lack of close-ups. I understand that y'all probably want to be able to see closer what I'm doing here. However, if you want to see better quality videos, please subscribe, because with enough subscribers and enough revenue, I can begin doing stuff like this full time. I have all sorts of really crazy, cool ideas I would like to do in the future. If the budget allows it, I would like to have an assistant person to operate the camera, which is the biggest thing that would help with the interactivity of these videos. So I have got the brackets in place, which is good news. And this particular kit comes with the thermal paste included. Thermal paste isn't generally that complicated, so there's no reason to try to overcomplicate it and be like, well, I gotta get the special brand. Okay, so this part is on, so we're going to go ahead and figure out the fans. It's important to keep airflow directional, so if you put a fan on in such a way so the airflow goes this way, you want to make sure the other fan is pulling that way, so it's a consistent direction of the airflow. Sorry you're missing out on some of the action. Again, I don't want the single video recording that's in 4K resolution to be, I don't know, 4 hours long. I don't have room for that, even on a 2 terabyte drive. So I just put the fans on, and initially I put them on kind of backwards because the cables to go to the splitter were going underneath the. Well, they weren't going underneath the fans. They were going just around, and it just ended up with this giant bunch over here. So what I've done here is I've repositioned them. It took a while, but I did it. And I'm using one of these zip tie things, not even the one that came like officially with it, but like just unofficial one that came with any number of these products. I think it came here, yeah, to bunch up the cables for the case. But anyway, I'm using it to just kind of engage in a little bit of cable management. But since this is one of my first builds, I suspect my cable management will not be the best. So putting it in the case is definitely the next step. The case only comes with one fan, which is probably fine since this is an air-cooled system, which means the CPU has its own fans, the GPU certainly has its own fans, and the GPU will be facing down. There's the whole bottom of the case is ventilated, and there's even a dust cover. The only dust cover that comes with it is actually on the bottom, but it's a full width or full length dust cover. I'll take that off at some point later, but just be aware of that comes with it. All right, now I'm at the point in the video where I'm got the motherboard installed, hopefully correctly. I've already made sure that there are no extra standoffs inside there. I made sure that every standoff corresponds directly to a hole on the motherboard. That's really important to avoid things shorting out and to avoid bending the motherboard. You don't want to do that, obviously. It also doesn't hurt to plug in the CPU power at this point, but due to where the CPU power plug is, it's honestly pretty much out of the way, and I will be doing quite a bit of cable managing. probably what I'll be doing is plugging and unplugging. So I'll take a cable like this, plug it in, and then realize, oh crap, I could have routed it behind the case and pushed it through one of the, not service holes, but one of these holes in a way that would probably be a bit more, a bit more effective, a bit more relevant, if you will. So that's something that I'm going to have to figure out basically as I go. It is time for the graphics card. Now I am going to have to plug more stuff in, but one of the things you have to plug in is graphics card power. So it makes sense then to go ahead and put the graphic card in, so that it can be one of the steps of plugging in the graphics PCIe power basically. So I just noticed that while it's true that I do need to remove two slot covers, because of the PCIe slot arrangement, I actually removed one of the incorrect slot covers. So this slot cover can actually go over here, I believe, in this slot over here, because this very first PCIe slot will not be used. Okay, I'm going to clean my mess in just a moment, but next I'm going to have to begin plugging stuff in. And this is where things get complicated, because if you plug stuff into the wrong thing or you jam it in, you could bend a pin and basically destroy either the motherboard or the cable. So I got the front panel connections all hooked up as far as I'm aware, which would include things like the HD audio. Let's see, it tells me. So it's got HD audio, the power LED switch, the USB 3.2 Type-C port, and then the hardest one, which is the USB 3.2 port, which is the two USB-As. Because those plug in a very special port that is famously pretty finicky. But my problem wasn't even so much that it was quote-unquote finicky. My problem was I couldn't freaking find it. And I thought it was this connection over here, and I kept trying to put it in. Luckily, I didn't try to jam it, because that could have bent the pins. But I did try to get it in several times. And it turns out the issue is that it's because this motherboard has most of the connections facing up, right? But there's one exception. Actually, there's two. But there's one major one, which is the USB 3.2 header, is actually facing sideways. And it's not just facing sideways, it's facing in such a way so that it's a nightmare. You have to take the cable and route it behind this metal plate and then shove it in from the side, and you can't get your hand in there this way. It's not possible. You have to go in from the back, and it's very difficult, but I did finally get it in. It's unfortunate when it's a non-modular power supply and you only have one SATA SSD, because then it is a bit of a waste, but it just kind of is what it is. But when it comes to the graphics card, I'm going to use one of the power things on the end so that I can cable manage all the other ones back out of the way, because they're all connected on a single thing, on a single wire, if that makes any sense. I've done an okay job of keeping things separated where they're supposed to be, I would say, but not a perfect job. But this is where there are different organizers that you can buy online that can allow you to better manage, not the cables per se, but to better manage the screws, the different types of screws for different applications. There are even some that have the option where you can use an expo marker and you can write on there. So now we got that done, it's time to go ahead and plug in the power via the PCIe. And it takes a single 8-pin. So it is not a married 8-pin, it is still single. And you can see the current progress. That's another thing. I did check to make sure that this air cooler would fit, even with the panel on. And what I found was there was less than 10 millimeters of slack or of space, which, hey, if you're building small form factor, even mid-size, you're used to working with like 2 millimeters. So this, by comparison, is nothing. All right, so I went ahead and got the graphics card installed and powered up. I did the best I could to cable manage for the most part, though there are some cables that'll just have to hang out in the bottom of the tray, essentially. And now I'm installing the second SSD, this time a SATA SSD, with a pretty nice white holding plate, essentially. I'm using a Lexar 2 terabyte solid state SSD. I really like M.2 SSDs, but I also like the SATA SSDs because they tend to be cheaper, and while they're not as fast, they're more than fast enough for everything that I'm doing. So I really do like these, and I really appreciate their inclusion. So I'm going to go ahead and put that in here. As far as, and then this screw is also serves pretty well as a thumb screw because it's not so taut that you have to have a screwdriver, but of course, for professionalism's sake, I'm going to use a screwdriver anyway. And now that that's in there, I'm going to have to find at least one of those included, let's see, included SATA cables. And this side gives you these LEDs that will power up in different colors to let you know if the computer is not functioning properly and why it is. It'll say it's the CPU, it's the graphics card, it's whatever. Just be sure when you first boot up the computer like this, any um, custom built desktop, to plug in your display cable, the HDMI display port, into the graphics card and not into the HDMI on the motherboard, because that will not allow you to fully diagnose if the system is actually working. Putting panels back on. Um, you could argue it's bad luck since I have not actually turned the computer on in any way, shape, or form, and therefore have no idea if it will even turn on at all. But I just want it to look pretty, you know? So I'm gonna plug everything in, and I don't have to worry about difficulty turning the power supply on because the switch is right there at the top and is largely unobstructed, so that's good. Definitely going to want to put this panel in, I think. It only goes in one singular spot. Get! If I can just get one screw in, it should be easier to get all the other ones in. If I can get one. All right, now everything is set up, all the panels are closed, but it's time for the final test to turn it on. So I put it down on the floor where the shockingly short power cable can actually reach the outlet. In my actual setup, I will have it in a place where the cable will not have to reach so far. It's also worth noting that the power connector for the PC is at the top, which is just never ideal, pretty much under any circumstance. I guess if you lay the PC sideways and put your monitor on top of it, maybe that could work, to be fair, but that's also going to block airflow. It just isn't ideal, and I don't like that. But I'm going to go ahead and sit down now for the first time. I genuinely don't know if the PC is going to turn on or if I'm going to get an error code or what. So I'm going to see what happens, and I'm going to show you the result. Success. All right, as you can see, I was able to get into the BIOS settings. There's still a lot more to do, like installing an operating system and truly making sure everything works as it should. I'm going to put Windows 11 on it so that I can actually much more easily see this diagnostic information. A lot of the stuff like CPU temps and whether SSDs or RAM are present are in the BIOS, but a lot of this information is easier to locate in an operating system. So particularly with regard to the front panel USB, it is just easier in some ways to get into the operating system first than just plug in a drive and see if anything happens. I didn't try to have any RGB lights. I kept it very stripped down and simple, but that's generally the way that I like it. If you like this video, please like the video. Please subscribe to the channel for more content like this, and I will see you in the next video.